This video is going to cover creating a search results page using the prepare statement, and it is extending. It's the last little section of the PHP MySQL Part 1 lab, which is available on Blackboard here, PHP MySQL Part 1, and I'm looking in the PDF. I'm using the PDF from PHP MySQL Part 1. And specifically, I'm going to be addressing this here, creating a search results page. So if you've already done the other sections of this lab, you will have created some pages and placed them on home pages, but we'll look at this one here, prepare multiple results. So the idea is that what we'll be able to like to do is to search by film name and get a film result back, which currently it's not doing. So the technique we're going to be using here is the same PHP Data Objects technique, which is documented here on the php.net site. So that's the technique we're going to use. So previously, what you should have already done is created your connection file with your database name in it. So this is the database name that you've created in PHP not the table name, it's the database name, so that'll be your user, student number, and then underscore db1 or db2 if you've created more than one, but you may as well choose the first one. That'll be your username, and then that's your PHP MySQL password that you created. So we need to load this. So this connection file is going to use those credentials to connect to the database, and it's going to create a PHP data object for us using those credentials and store in this variable here, and that's what we're going to reference inside of prepare multiple. So in order to do that, we need to load that in. So what we need to then do is we can use require, and we can say go to the includes folder and then find con.inc.php. So we reference the file that we want to include. So we can actually, there is part of the code in the PDF will help you out here, because on page 9 we've used this in previous examples, so we're requiring it in to load the connection file. That gives us access to the PHP data object, which we'll use in a second. You can, if you wanted to, use include as well as require, or include once or require once. The difference between include and require is that include won't force a fatal error if it doesn't find that, whereas require will. So given that we do need the database connection, I'll make that require. So the next thing to do would be to start putting together an SQL query. So it's not dissimilar to what was already done on page 9 there. So I'm going to lift that SQL there, and then we'll place that inside of here. But we want to write a different query. So this time, rather than select star from movies, where the film ID equals some value, we're interested in searching by the film name. So I'll get that film name there. And then this is my placeholder. So this uses a colon, because this is going to be a placeholder for our prepare statement. So that's going to become the name of a film that we want to search against. So that's created our SQL query. Now what we need to do is to prepare that. So this is where the PHP data object comes in for the first time. So we are going to use the prepare method. So this is the arrow syntax, which allows us to access the methods and properties of an object. That's our PHP data object that we created in our connection file there. So we call the prepare method of it using that SQL statement up here. Now what PHP knows is that this syntax here with a colon in front of it is a placeholder. So it knows it's going to receive some data to replace that with an actual value. We save this in a variable called that I've given the name of stmt, because this is a statement, a PDO statement. So what you've created there is this thing here. It's a PHP data object statement that is going to allow us to get results out of the database. Okay, so what we then need to do is bind that value in. So this next line of code, which again we can use the basis of the previous example to help us here. So we're going to call the bind param method of the PHP Data Objects statement, and this time we want to bind in the film name. So that's our placeholder name there. So notice the colon there matches with this here. So that's what we're going to bind into here. And rather than the film ID, we're going to load in the value from our form. So at the moment, what happens is that when you type a value in, you see it appears there in the query string, because that's that the form is currently has no action. So the form is here around about line 39, so it's got no action or method, which means that the data is sent using get back to the same page. So you've got a named value there, a film name, so that's the value that's going to get sent back, and it's going to get sent as a get. So we'll put that in like so. Now the example I used to build this up from previously was using just the film ID, which would have been an integer, but in this case it's a string. So what this is actually doing is it's telling our bind param to bind this value into here, but as a string. So that's the value type, that's the actual value, that's the placeholder to go into there. Right, so next up we execute that query. So that tells PHP to run that query now, so that the inside of the statement we now have some data that we can access. So we want to see if we've got some results. So down in the document we can output the results here. Now we're going to extend this in a second so that we can get multiple results. So therefore what I'm going to do is use a while loop to say while we can still extract rows from our statement. So we'll take our statement and we'll use the fetch object method. So while row is still able to extract objects from our statement, it's going to loop around here, and inside of here we could echo out a paragraph tag, for example. We could then put our row, and then row is an object that's been extracted from that statement, so we can access the likes of film name, and let's put a paragraph tag in at the end and then close it with a semicolon. Okay, so we have our query up here that gets executed. It's going to take the film name from the form and run it against the SQL, and then down here it's going to loop through for every match and then hopefully show the film name. Right, so I'll just need to manipulate the files here on my end. So if you're working on the university's home pages, you can just save directly. So let's refresh what we've got here now. Oh, so we can see straight away that that has worked, but let me just test it from scratch. So we go in, and if I type in Skyfall, we've got Skyfall in our database, so when we query, you see it picks it up. So that's great. Now we've also got it. You can see that it picks that up. So that's okay. Notice the film names I'm using here are nice and short. So I know I've got Guardians of the Galaxy in there, but if I search for Galaxy, it's not going to pick it up because I need to know the exact name of the film. So that's where we need to address our code a little bit. And that's what the PDF is asking you to do. So can you search in a less exact way so that we want wildcards in our SQL? So the way that we're going to do this is we just need to address our logic up here. So we know that this is the value that we're getting from the form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new variable that I'll call search term. And I'll set this equal to a percentage sign, which is a wildcard, and then I'll concatenate that to our value from get film name, and then I'll concatenate that to another percentage line. So So search term is now going to be the name of the film that you sent from the form, but with wildcards added each end. Now the reason why I've done that is because what we would like is a like search. So rather than film name being exact equal to something, it's going to be like something. So where we're heading with this is that this should look something like this, where you might have that kind of setup. So you can see these percentages are wildcards either side of Galaxy, so that it would look for anything that had Galaxy in the name of the film. Now we want to bind this in though, so that search term is going to be replaced there. So that's got our wildcards, it's got our value from the form, it's going to get bound in as film name. So we can just put our placeholder back in there. So that is going to generate the code as you saw it. So if you wanted to see what that select statement would look like, I've just put it as a comment. It's going to look something like select star from movies. Give me everything from movies where film name is like, and then it would be, if we did stick with the Galaxy example, it would look like that. So if you ran that query in the SQL tab inside the PHP MyAdmin, you should see some results. And we're going to get multiple results here, which is where our loop will help us out, because you can go around for every possible match. Okay, so let's, again, you can just save directly to the server, but I'm just going to move things around a little bit on my machine here. So now that's over on the server, let's have a look, and I'm just going to refresh the page. Right, so interestingly, I'm getting everything listed. That's well, but let's just, and we'll address these other issues as well. So let me just try searching now by Galaxy, and there's the two Guardians of the Galaxy films. If I try Star, I get all the films that have got Star in the name there. Okay, right, so let's just tidy this up, because when you first arrive at the page, if you just click somewhere else, come back in, you'll see that it does show everything, and you do get this message at the top. So we should address that. To explain what's going on there, basically if you arrive at the page, you have it will run the query using a white space for this get value, so that it's going to return every possible value. So we need to tidy that up a little bit. So this is where we could really check to see whether we've got a value here or not. So what we could do is we could say if is set $get film name, then if that's the case, we will generate our search term. Okay, and then we will run our query. So we could actually put our if statement around the rest of that, so it closes down here. Okay, so we are only going to run this query if we've got a value, and we should do the same down here, so that we only run this query if somebody actually sends us some data in the query string. So if that's set, great, we will generate it. Right, so let's have a look on the server now. So if I refresh, so I've got a little error there, so curly brace line 11, let's have a look. So I'd got that curly brace there snuck in, get rid of that. So there's my if, closes there, everything is now inside of that. Let's try that again. So back to our server and refresh. So that's looking better. We're not getting any kind of strange error messages or notices, and it's not showing me all the films. And if I search for star, I do get the results there. So because this time we have got so film name is set now up there in the URL. So this value of get film name does exist. Let's extend this a little bit further, because previously in the PDF I mentioned the fact that you could use a row count method of the PDO statement to find out how many records were returned by a query. So let me just lift that, which is on page 9 of the PDF. And what I'll do is, after we've executed the query, we'll generate this total films. Right, so what I could now do is we could take this total films value, and down here we could put in a little message. So we could say inside of here now, we could put in a nested if statement. So we could say if total films equals 0. So if it doesn't find any films, we could echo out a little message to say sorry, no films found. Else, then we'd want to put our while inside of that else. So just make sure I don't mess up the brackets again. So down here, we'll put in a second curly, and I'll just lay that out a little bit nicer for you. So you can see that if else there has got the while loop inside of it. So we've got, have we got a film name being sent? Has anybody run a query? So have we been sent a value is what this is checking, and then this is checking obviously have we got any matches, and then if we have, it's going to loop through all the matching. Great, let's give that a little test. So if you just hop back to your home page's server, you can assume that you've saved that. Let's refresh again. So we've just tidied up things a little bit. So if I click on any one of these and then click back, we arrive. We've not sent a value. There's nothing in the query string there. There's nothing to get. If I do a valid search for Galaxy, there's all the Guardians of the Galaxy films. But if I search for something that I've not got in there, so Parasite, it's not in there yet. We haven't got that, so it tells us that no films were found. And you could extend this even further, because you might want to in here now. If we copy that line there, we could say we found $, total number of films. So we could actually tell them how many films that we found, so we could use that value in there. Okay, let's try it again. So we've got 19 films. Okay, right. So now I'm going to, do have an experiment with this at this point. I'm going to take things a little bit further now by putting some more data in and showing you what you can do with dates. But if you have struggled with any of those concepts at this point, I suggest you stop at this point, look through what we've got there, make sure you're happy with what we've got before proceeding with the next little section. Okay, so let's look at outputting some extra information in here. So we've got our film name. Maybe we want to put the film certificate in. So that's easy enough. Let's say I want to put it in brackets. I can say $row film certificate, like that. So I'm just putting the brackets in so it looks nice. And let's move that across the server. Again, you just save and go back and test on home pages, assuming you're in your public HTML folder. So now you can see we've got the film certificate appearing in brackets next to the names of the films. Great. So other bits of data that we've got, here's we've got the release date. So maybe I'll put in a line break. In fact, let's put in a line break here. And then I'll need to echo another line underneath. Because what I'd like to put in here is say date released, colon, and then we have row release date is one of our fields. Great, and then we'll close the paragraph off to keep it nice and tidy. So I'm just using, I could have echoed all that on one line, but it makes sense to kind of break it down a little bit. Right, so let's have a look at that now. So what I'm hoping for is for the release date to now appear underneath the film, so let's just restrict it to Galaxy. So there's the release dates of the two Guardians of the Galaxy films. Now, the issue here is that that date is, that's how dates are formatted inside of MySQL. They are formatted in the format of YYY, MM, DD. Okay, that's the format that is used. So that is the 8th. So that is the 1st of August. We can see why the confusion comes in, because you might, if you didn't know that was the format, think that that was the 8th of January, but it's not. Okay, so making users think about what date that is what you want to avoid. You want to avoid making users think. So we can change that date to appear in lots of different formats. So the trick that I'm going to use is again in the PDF, and it's up here on let's find it. There we go. Displaying dates on page 9 again. So we've seen that that's the date in this format of YYYMMM. Clear that bit. So that's the date that it's appearing in if we just take it straight out of the database. But what we're going to do is we're going to take that date and we're going to run it through a method called string to time. And that will take that date in from that format and it will convert it into what's known as a timestamp. Now let's show you what that would look like. So I'm going to do this on this line above here. So I've now taken this release date, which we've seen is year, month, day, and it's now going to put that as a timestamp. So let's put the timestamp down here instead and show you what that looks like. And this is going to look a little bit weird. And you'll see you've got these strange numbers appearing now, but they are different. Now what that represents is what's known as a Unix timestamp. Now if you Google that, Unix timestamp, you will see that what it is it represents the amount of time in seconds since the 1st of January 1970. So it's what's known as a Unix EPOP. It's a common way in computing of storing time. And the beauty of that is we can use that timestamp and convert it into any format that we choose. So I'm going to create a variable called display date. That's what I'm actually going to use to display to the user. And I'm going to use the date method of PHP that takes, as you see, some format strings and a timestamp, which is what we've just generated. So there's lots of different kind of formatting flags that you can use in here. So if I just use what I've got in the PDF, I've got an uppercase D, a lowercase d, an M and a Y. So let's have a look what that will do. Uppercase D, lowercase d, M and Y. And then our second parameter is our timestamp. And then this timestamp, this display date, which is a nicely presented date, is what I'll actually show to the user. So that's what we'll use in there. Right. Okay. So what's that done for us? Let's have a look. So there's the date now. So we can see that is the 1st of August. We can see that is the 5th of May. and it's displaying it. So what's happening there is that the uppercase D is giving us the day of the week, and the lowercase d is giving us the day of the month. The M, uppercase M, is giving us the month, and the Y is giving us the year. And if you had a look and you went to PHP date format flags, you'll see there's a list of them here, but if you go into the documentation, there's lots of different ways that you can represent the date. So there's no excuse. You can format the date any way that you or whoever's building the website for any format that they want, it can appear. So I'll just show you a little example that I quite like. So what I could do is if I put in J and S, so let's see if I can find these in here. So J, there's too many of them, isn't there? Oh, there you go. So can't find it in there, but what it will do is, and that's better. Right, so on here, J is going to give me the day of the month without leading zeros, lowercase j, and on uppercase S is going to give me the English ordinal suffix. So what we mean is like the first, second, third, fifth, something like that. It'll do that for me without me having to do any kind of additional working out. So let me put that over onto the server. And let's refresh now. So we get the first, we get the fifth. Okay, so that's pretty neat. Okay, so I think I'll leave that there. But in summary, what you can do, as you can see, is you can take the date format. So what we're doing here is we are converting a date in YYYMMDD, which is how they're stored in the database, into a Unix time stamp, which is a number, which is the amount of seconds since the 1st of January 1970. And then this is converting a Unix time stamp into a nice date format. And you choose what format you want by using these flags. So what I actually show to the user after all of that is this display date. That is what gets echoed out. Okay, thank you.